A lot has changed for the Bruins since the spring, and for Bob Chesney, it's all been for the better.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. We're talking about what's changed from UCLA spring as we lead into week one, highlighting the UCLA win totals on FanDuel. Secondly, can UCLA do what BYU did and separate from the athletic department? What do I mean? I'll discuss next. And finally, what are the crazy things going on in college football? Who are the Bruins that are standing out nationally as rated by On3? We'll tell you all that and more. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Let's tell you more about FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this MLB season. But where we start is UCLA's win total on FanDuel is currently 6.5 for the 2026 season. All the way back in March, and here it is now. So what do I mean by things have improved? If you listen to the latest Big Ten Squad show, I was a part of it, we had a question from our host, Jacob Goins, Locked On Hoosiers, great host, neutral arbiter of college football in that show. And he brought up a point of, who do we think has made improvements in the Big Ten Conference that we are higher on? Now, we had Isaiah Hole of Locked On Wolverines, and he kind of mentioned that UCLA was on the radar. And selfishly, with a lot of bias, although I think there's reason to back it up, UCLA has made some significant improvements, right? Everything in the coaching staff, UCLA, if you're looking at what they've added just from a coach's standpoint, you've got a new NFL coach or NFL QB turned quarterbacks coach in Derek Carr. In the weeks before the season, UCLA has been flipping back and forth between eligible and not eligible, but currently eligible Trent Hendrick as a top-tier transfer who might even push UCLA closer to the top 5 on On3's top 10 transfer portal list. All right, UCLA is on the outside looking in from incoming transfer talent, and UCLA might very well want to be the best teams in terms of incoming talent. And then you look at the win totals. Been hard set for a bowl team, but an 8-9 win campaign is certainly on the horizon. And then you're looking from just the betting favorite. UCLA has gone from the underdog at Cal to a favorite. Now, those are very slim margins from 1.5 each way, but UCLA is currently a minor favorite. It's basically a coin flip, pick'em game between the Bruins and the Golden Bears on week one in what I think is one of the most fascinating matchups that is not being talked about. It's not even a dark horse. It's a game that should be talked about between two teams, longtime college football rivals that haven't played in a while, and UCLA needs to give them a beating. But the vibes are high. This is a matchup between two teams who are currently engaged in West Coast recruiting rivalries that have not been seen for a long time. If ever, going for the same guys, same dudes. You see highlights on social media from UCLA's commit Miles Baker making plays in his high school games after the Bruins stole him from Cal. So the Bruins are on the up and up. UCLA, the PR for the Bruins, whether it be their own social media team, their content creation team, just what Bob Chesney's put out there, his impressions that he made on Big Ten Media Day. Heck, you got Bill Simmons out there becoming a de facto UCLA fan, having Bob Chesney on every chance he gets. And now UCLA's just slowly becoming the talk of the town. I know that there's some big-time optimism across town. For what reason? I don't know. But UCLA will clearly be much better. They're more talented and clearly a lot better coached. But most importantly, they're just tightening the gear. Everything is going well for UCLA heading into this fall part of the summer. Because it's still going to be summer heat for a little bit. We're going to feel it at the Rose Bowl in those first couple of weeks, all right, when we're baking in the sun or baking in the tailgate, all right? But we're going to be seeing a football team that is going to be a winner. Not necessarily a 10-win or an 11-win team or a playoff team, but this is a team that's going to turn this program and the culture into a winning culture. So if you're looking at FanDuel 6.5 win total over under, yeah, this team is going bowling. And I'm feeling it's likely that they can go above and beyond that. 7-8 wins is well within what this team can do. It's going to take a big leap from Nico, but you look at the resources around him. Nico at UCLA has never been more well stocked. He's got a staff and an offense that should lead him to a lot more success. And if other QBs have taken the jump, then Nico can hopefully, in his 4th year of college football, finally, with a full off season at UCLA and an offense that is engineered towards his strengths and a QB whisperer, can lead UCLA to the promised land, which is just from mediocrity to relevance. All right? And we're not even talking national relevance. We're just talking competing in these games, winning some of them that they shouldn't, and all of a sudden, maybe they'll be the talk of the town. Maybe they'll be the overrated team coming early October, where they're not just there yet, but they probably will be. So my hope for this season, UCLA becomes the overrated team that we get super hyped about, and that they get proclaimed back, even maybe a year early, but that's going to help them in recruiting, which is already a top 20 machine. In a short off season for Bob Chesney, he's turned this team into a contender recruiting-wise, transfer, high school. UCLA has got the tools and the wherewithal to hold off all bidders for their top-tier players from JMU transferring in, attacking other teams and their commits, and the vibes are going up. So the vibe for UCLA, maybe not immaculate just yet, but something to take note on. So I'm going to go with the over for UCLA 6.5 wins. The Bruins have a lot more home games than they do road games in this season, including winnable home games, and they have winnable road games. Minnesota and Maryland are the 2 games that are going to make the difference in this win total going over 6.5. You get one, if not both of these games, that turns this team into an 8-9 win team with an upset or 2 away from 10 wins. Now that's obviously banking a lot of home wins, and there are some scrappy Big Ten teams that think they deserve the nod for the overlooked Cinderella team in 26. But everything is pushing towards the narrative that the Bruins are right there. There's this transfer piece about to peak. They've got these guys filling the gaps defensively. The coaching staff has been mostly working together for quite a bit under Chesney, and if they've replaced guys, they either brought in West Coast ties, recruiting ties, or guys that have been around the scene for a long time. So I can't wait to see what UCLA has in 26. Next, though, what does the future hold for UCLA football? Is it something drastic like we saw from BYU early in the day? Let me discuss next on Locked On UCLA. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location, so less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People who are finding quality hires on Indeed right now, in the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Think about this. Maybe you're trying to get the right person, the right player, and that's going to change the outcome of everything. UCLA got a big-time player just a couple of weeks ago in the portal, right? And it's having somebody who knows exactly what needs to happen and makes things run smoother. Well, that's going to happen with UCLA with what they got in Trent Hendrick, who knows the defense, who knows everything, and he's basically a plug-and-play. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. And the right person can cut through the chaos, and that's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. There's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Cruising on here with Locked On UCLA, some news around college sports. Will UCLA restructure the athletic department just like they kind of restructured the rest of the college sporting world? UCLA and USC bolted from the Pac-12, broke it up with their move to the Big Ten. They were the big final sword that sliced off the Pac-12 head, and now it looks completely different, with Washington State and Oregon State trying to pick up the pieces. So what's the next bold thing that UCLA could do if you're looking at, what's this team got next? Well, from what you're looking at, BYU earlier in the day has restructured its athletic department. What does that mean? Well, the school vice president is going to oversee their football program. Here's an article from Deseret News, if I'm saying that correctly. You have their head coach, Kalani Sitake, who's going to report directly to the university vice president instead of the athletic director, Brian Santiago, who's going to oversee the remaining programs. All right. This happens right before the first game. And while there have been different reports, I'm not exactly as in tune, but I know there's been some rumblings of some disgruntled behavior between the AD and coach. That what's it going to look like in the future? Well, for UCLA, what's interesting about their program right now? What's really put them on track? Was it a perfect hire? No, UCLA, in these last couple of cycles for coaching, let Chip Kelly walk, went quick with Deshaun Foster, had to fire him quickly, and with Julio Frank in charge, they put in a coaching search committee, identified Bob Chesney, and gave him what he needed to implement what UCLA needs to be successful with Bob Chesney's vision. So is there a world where very recently we had the banners flying over the Rose Bowl, get rid of Martin Jarmond? Not Deshaun Foster. It was fire UCLA athletic director Martin Jarmond. All right. And he's been in some hot water. Obviously, some things have maybe not gone according to his vision, whether in his control. You could argue coaching hires is certainly in that. Or some things that UCLA being in the red, something the Bruins have dealt with long before Martin even got there, are his authority. So is there a world where UCLA will break off and Julio Frank, the chancellor, right, who I could think would be the dude that would truly oversee something like this? Obviously, it's a little different between BYU overlooking this while UCLA is a public university. So there's only so much that could happen. But is there a world where UCLA takes off? They need more resources. They need some better vision. And maybe Julio Frank is already kind of operating like this as we speak, but just not officially. Like, who is Bob Chesney reporting to? Now, obviously, we'll see UCLA's AD be there. He'll be impactful. He'll be vocal. He'll be a presence on the sideline in the press conferences around Bob Chesney. And this isn't exactly a full-on attack of the job, but will UCLA restructure their athletic department to where they're completely separate, and this entity for UCLA will be led by men's basketball, which could maybe save the athletic department, and then there's separate funds and separate overseeing for football, because what has happened recently? They've tried to go to the Rose Bowl. They've messed up the separation of the NIL. They're trying to figure out how can you fund football. Well, how about we separate it? And then next thing you know, things might be different in future conference affiliations. All right. So maybe are they going to take after the BYU model lately? Well, it's a little interesting. Here are other examples according to the Deseret News. All right. This is what they put as recent restructuring of athletic departments have come through. Stanford, their new athletic director, former global CEO of Nike and PayPal, and they want a mandate to reorganize in the image of a professional sports team. That's kind of what Deseret News is putting out there. Then you've got University of South Florida. They've hired a business leader as an athletic director. His title was changed to CEO, and he's added a COO and a chief business officer to oversee public-private partnerships, analytics, and commercial operations. All right, so that's a lot of lingo right there. You bring in the University of Utah, commercial CEO to manage separate corporate front office that handles all licensing, ticket sales, branding, and multimedia revenue. So there's different hierarchies going around. College football teams are getting operated like NFL franchises. Can UCLA do something similar, being a public UC school in the state of California? Can they do so? We saw Cal do something different to their own athletic communications office, right? I think it's the Strawberry Creek with what they're trying to do in the studios. Is UCLA going to do something similar? They've done that with what they've poured out content-wise, letting Chesney do as much as he can, having the Bruin documentary of the team building through spring. That's had a lot of views on YouTube. That's obviously going to be a lot more money and revenue generated towards the program. Maybe minuscule, but maybe enough. Maybe there's going to be a completely separate entity overlooking UCLA's future in the Rose Bowl and their future home games. Those are all things to be looking for what UCLA's next big move is. But Martin Jarmond was a part of the big move and got the support, which is surprising considering UCLA was in a unique, weird place prior, going from Pac-12, and then next thing you know, they're in the Big Ten. So you got to applaud them for that, for being proactive instead of reactive. And this is a chance where UCLA can be proactive instead of reactive. And I'm not saying the football team has to separate from the athletic department, but there are different ways and different motives that teams are operating under. As a public school, UCLA can't completely say, hey, we're going all football. They're trying to do so. They've done so. But will they completely adopt more pro sports models without officially saying so? Or can they do something as drastic as some of these other teams and schools, some of which are in the private sector, are trying to make it more CEO-based, numbers-based, getting a new leader to oversee Bob Chesney and company, which is kind of what happened when they hired a new coach. Very interesting to see who he actually answers to and what's actually happening behind the scenes. Something to take note of in the future of UCLA athletics. Next, though, we're going to talk about what Pete Nakos of On3 listed as a top-tier receiver for the Bruins might be a breakout, and how these college sports rules and TROs continue to favor the athlete, and we don't know what's coming next. We'll talk about the latest ruling and all that more next on Locked On UCLA. Locked On UCLA is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with Daily Dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is just another way to stay engaged with everyday's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. Or you can check out UCLA's win totals on FanDuel. I talked about them first segment. UCLA 6.5. Hit the over. The Bruins are going to do it here in 2026. In terms of Daily Dingers, maybe pick anybody who's playing against the Dodgers, because it seems like the Dodgers aren't hitting any home runs, and everybody's hitting home runs against the Dodgers. So you're ready to play your game today. Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, the official partner of the MLB. All right, final segment here with Locked On UCLA. We're discussing the latest rulings that might be hurting the SEC and other teams and maybe helping former Bruins. And most importantly, starting with what Pete Nakos said might be a breakout receiver. Posted on the socials earlier today, Pete Nakos was mentioning from On3 that, hey, there are some sources. This is what he said. Throughout the spring, sources told On3 keep tabs on the transfer from South Carolina, Brian Rowe. This is name Ethan Sabo have talked about. Ethan Sabo and I have talked about on the show. Other UCLA in-person team coverage have mentioned. And this is what Pete Nakos continues to say. He's continued to garner attention. Sources believe he could emerge as Nico's top target. Huge. This was a part of a bigger 20 under-the-radar college football transfers that turned heads in camp. This is something Pete Nakos talked about a couple weeks ago. So this is a dude that's been out there. All right. Now remember, one of UCLA's top targets transferred to Nebraska. All right. So UCLA needs another top receiver. You have Mikey Matthews returning. You have some interesting tight end targets, but the Bruins are still hoping for somebody to break out this year. Is it a speedster? Is it somebody who can go deep over the top? Or is it Brian Rowe? Brian Rowe might be that name hailing from South Carolina, one of those big-time transfers that makes the difference for UCLA. Maybe overlooked as a Gamecock, but maybe not so as a Bruin, all right? Maybe it's a pair of SEC transfers who are coming in, one from Nico a year ago, now from Rowe this year, to make it happen offensively. Because for this offense to work, yeah, maybe it's not going to be ground and pound, a couple of yards and a cloud of dust every play. You're going to need to go over the top, go vertical, and move the chains. That has to be a form of somebody in the passing game from the receiving position. And it looks like it's Brian Rowe getting recognition from local, getting recognition nationally. So hopefully that could be one of those under the radar, but predicted under the radar improvements from the Bruins on the receiving side. Now we pivot our look towards the latest ruling in college sports, which is, according to ESPN and Pete Thamel, there's a judge's order from Dallas who prohibits the NCAA, SEC, and the commissioner Greg Sankey from stopping a group of athletes, some of which listed on NFL rosters, from returning to college sports for an extra season of play, which means this whole conference affiliation that they're trying to stop and keep players from returning, this is in favor of the college players. I'm not sure it's going to do anything from the NFL rules, but if the conferences are trying to make things happen, namely the SEC, they're not going to block them, all right? So here are some players that were listed in this report. You've got Jordan Hudson and the Cowboys. You've got a linebacker from the Chiefs. You got a receiver, Amari Evans from the Chiefs. So some of 41 players on this restraining order. Christina Iwala, remember that name? Yeah, former Bruin, one-time SEC player. Bailey Maupin, who signed contracts with the WNBA, are listed on this order. It's a growing number of challenges from the NCAA's eligibility orders. So it says the SEC, NCAA, and a commissioner can't block players' returns based off transfer portal rules or their time on a pro roster. All right? And hey, if they want to prohibit for another reason, and they still got to go to court and argue. So you've seen all the Power 4 conferences find ways to block the pro athletes, the NFL players, to come back, or any additional language in some of these conferences, at least initially, it says no pro player can return. And now the latest judge in Dallas is saying, no, you can't do that. You cannot do that. Now, what it's going to affect NFL-wise with some of these guys on rosters who will be free agents in 2027, can't play in this upcoming 26 league season, I'm not entirely sure. But the fact that with the extra eligible year, right, the 5 for 5, and then you've got judges left and right throwing in, oh, you can get an extra year. Oh, you can. Maybe you can go back from college to pro. Maybe you can go from pro to college. Maybe you can do both. Maybe you can't do any of those things. Maybe your coach is going to be suspended. Well, maybe they're not going to try and block the athlete, but they will suspend the coach. And that's kind of the hope that if you get suspended, maybe you'll be okay with taking an athlete returning from pro to college, all right? So you've got Lane Kiffin going crazy. You've got UCLA, who has a weird gray area in terms of how they're able to get Trent Hendrick back, but didn't declare officially with the eligibility on his clock, and he's a guy that didn't sign a roster. So the Bruins are okay. The fact that it's really singling out the SEC, according to this ESPN article, is what makes it fascinating to watch. I talked about this in the Big Ten squad. There's been a lot of rulings in favor of the NCAA lately. They had won 3 straight, according to Pete Thamel, and now this is one that a conference is losing. Well, we have no Big Ten teams in Texas. You can remember that you've got Texas and Texas A&M in the greater Texas area, and you have a Dallas judge trying to do this. So it's interesting where this is going to go. The problem is you can't have every judge in various states changing the rules every 5 seconds into the season, because at some point, every team is either going to be cheating, not, or be playing by different rules based on its conference affiliation. Is it getting confusing? Do you know who's actually eligible? Who can realistically transfer? Who might be in the portal and who won't? It's impossible to keep track of. It really is. And it's getting borderline obnoxious. Next thing you know, you're going to see the judge in insert state. Maybe we see West Virginia, who comes out and says they're ineligible for some reason because the Big 12 schools want to have some extra chances to get no athlete. I don't know. It's all crazy. So for now, it looks like there are players who are pro athletes cannot be barred from returning or blocked for any reason unless these top tier people in the conferences like Greg Sankey or the NCAA send officials to argue their case in points. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And they should have just grandfathered in the last year. Or at least done this so much earlier than having court cases into late August when we're starting college football week 0 now, week 1 next week, and we still don't know who can play and who can't, it's a little crazy. But that's why we talk about it every day and we get excited. In our next Locked On UCLA episode, we'll dive into all the chaos, all the craziness with Ethan Sabo. We thank you for being everydayers, listening each and every day. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. And as always, go Bruins.